Hi, and welcome to Paranormal Chronicles. I'm your host, Joe Miranda. This podcast series, we're going to delve into the paranormal events that I have documented over the past 13 years. Before we go any further, I want to first state that I am a flawed man and I'm a sinner. I give God all the glory and I believe Jesus Christ is my Savior. I renounce Satan. However, I do not um, discredit his effects here on earth. With that said, the first episode, this episode one, is going to be centered around the events of my mother's death in 2000, on April 6th of 2000. Um, there's a lot of ways you could describe my mother. You could say that she was nurturing, she was loving, she was caring, she was kind, all those things. But I think the best way to describe her is to share uh, with you uh, the very last birthday card that she sent me. If you, I have it right here, and I'm going to go ahead and share, um, what she wrote to me. Uh, Understanding that my mother was diagnosed with leukemia, Philadelphia syndrome leukemia, in late May of 1999. And this card that she sent to me was dated June 20th, 1999. And I'll just share a little excerpt. And this basically will help you to understand the events that took place on that day in April 6th. So she wrote this. She said, "Miracles never cease to amaze us. Your father actually went out to the store at 12:30 a.m. to pick this card out for you. Isn't it a wonderful life?" She said, "Your loving encouragement has made me strong to get on with this. Happy birthday to you. Love always, Mom." And that basically sums up my mother. She was selfless. I mean, here she had just been diagnosed with leukemia. Um, and here she's making the statement how wonderful life is on top of everything else. So my mom could see the silver lining in everything. And I'm proud to call her my mother. So this story regarding the events of her death starts on Sunday, April 2nd. Um, my mother passed the next Thursday, April 6th, 11:30. And so at the time I was living in Las Vegas, it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I get a phone call from my father, and he's at the hospital. Now, my mother had been going through treatment. They started her on chemo, and he called to tell me that she was being intubated the next morning, and I needed to get on the next plane. Now, I could hear my mother in the background, and my mother did not want to talk to me. And looking back, she didn't want to say goodbye. So, I obviously I got a flight out as soon as I could, and I flew into Pennsylvania. She was being treated down at the University of Maryland Hospital down in Baltimore, Maryland. I flew into Allentown, Pennsylvania, and was picked up by family members. And at that point, I'm getting updates. Things aren't looking good. They gave her a chemo treatment, and it basically fried her. Uh, she was being intubated. She had become septic. She had sepsis. So, um, you know, there were a lot of things going on, which happens to a lot of cancer patients. Um, and of course, we held out hope, but um, it was looking it was looking really dire. So I get to the hospital later that afternoon, early that afternoon, and my mother was intubated. She was sedated. She wasn't responding at all. Obviously, they had sedated her. So I guess I was hoping of all hope that I had a chance to have seen her while she was awake, but that wasn't the case. So I remember, throughout that day, you know, my mother was running a fever. I mean, she had an infection, and she had no hair, and um, could still see it was my mom, but I didn't recognize her. Obviously, I'd never seen my mom without hair before. And putting compresses on her, I couldn't feel an energy coming from her at all, and I thought that was kind of odd. So I um, kind of made note of that, and um, in that situation, you're at the hospital, you're just getting updates from the doctors, nurses are coming back and forth. And with that said, the first night came, and when I was a little kid, I used to get the croup, and my mother would stay up with me uh, at night, and she'd turn the shower on, and I would cough up, and eventually, I guess, it would pass, and then my mom would put me to bed, and then I wake up the next day, and things would be okay. But I made a promise to myself while I was there that if anything was going to happen to my mother, it wasn't going to be at night alone in the dark, because she never left me in that state. So I would I would sit up at night. I would sit in the hospital chair by her bed there, and just I would sit up and I'd watch the monitors. I'd watch my mom. I'd take compresses, and you know try to help make her comfortable. I would talk to her, and I would tell her I was here, and people were coming back and forth, and people were coming to visit, and I would tell her who came to visit that particular day. Um and this went on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and um when the morning came, I would the sun was coming up, felt comfortable that at least it was light out, and um I would catch a couple hours of sleep, and I wasn't eating, obviously. I mean, I wasn't very hungry. It's a lot of there's a lot of stress, watching your mother uh, go through that. And so I remember I think it was the second day we were there. Um, my younger brother came with his wife and their little son Isaiah. And Isaiah, I guess, had been going through a teething phase, and he was, he wasn't in the best of moods, and he was finicky and all that, and what happens to kids when they're teething. I think he was about a year and a half old, right around there. But evidently, my father and I were down at the cafeteria getting coffee the one morning, and they brought Isaiah in, and I guess Isaiah cried out, and my mother actually sat up in bed, and her eyes opened up, and she reached for the baby. Um, that kind of freaked everybody out because that wasn't supposed to be able to happen because my mom was sedated. We heard the story when we got back, and again, I thought it was odd um, that I couldn't sense any energy around my mother. And I thought I would have, long story short, my mother actually witnessed me uh, being run over in front of our house in a cul-de-sac in Pennsylvania when I was like, I believe, 4 years old. She called me across the street. I was at the neighbor's house. She called me across the street, and I was pushing a Tonka truck, and there just happened to be an insurance salesman who was in his car, and I guess he finished up his paperwork, started the car up just as I'm pushing my Tonka truck in front of his vehicle, and over top of me he went. And next thing I know, I'm in the middle of the street. I've got different parts of my body hurt because there were tire marks on my body, not across my torso, but across my waist, across my arms, and my Tonka truck was pinned up underneath the undercarriage of the car. Um, so that, that always, my mom never forgot that. So she always worried about me, and I mean, she loved all her kids. There were five of us, but I think that, it made her especially afraid for me for what she witnessed. She never got over it. And I can understand why. I mean, that must have been a horrible thing to witness. So I thought, if anything, that, hope upon hope that, my mom would at least have the opportunity to say goodbye to me, before she passed on, because as days went on, it became obvious um, that she wasn't going to make it. In fact, the doctor came to my father and told him that the only thing keeping her alive was the blood pressure medication that she was on. And even if they kept giving her the blood pressure medication, there was no, um, there was no guarantee that she was even going to survive the infection. So my dad came to me, and together we made the decision. I mean, she was suffering, but the hardest part about that is that knowing how much my mother loved life. My mother loved every second of every minute of every day of every month of every year that she was alive. That was a very tough decision to make, but my dad couldn't make it alone and talked with the doctors, and she wasn't going to survive. We were prolonging the inevitable. I mean, her heart rate was racing. I think her heart rate was like over 130 during that time, and her fever was really high, and um, it was bad. So we made the decision that we were going to let nature take its course, and at that point we knew that the end was near for her. So Wednesday night, um, which was the Wednesday night into Thursday morning, I remember I was at the nurse's station in the ICU desk, and I had just gotten a cup of coffee, and I had just come out of the room, and I was talking with one of the nurses, and they were asking me, how was my mom? I said as comfortable as she could, and I said, was there any change? And the doctor have any new news, any better news? But of course there wasn't. And this is probably about, actually it was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there. And I was talking to the nurses, and I'm standing there, and it felt like the floor was just coming up towards my face, and it kind of shocked me because I never experienced something like that before. And so kind of caught myself, and the nurses were sitting there, and they were shocked at first, and then they came running around the desk, and they grabbed a hold of me, and they said, "Are you okay?" I go, "Yeah, I think so. I just don't know what happened there." And they go, "Well, looked like you were about to pass out." I said, "Well, it felt like it. I mean, it felt like the floor was coming at my face." So they took me into one of the rooms, and checked my vitals, and next thing you know, they were taking my blood pressure. They said my blood pressure was through the roof. It was like, I don't know, 200 over, I don't know, some crazy number, like 120 or 130. I don't know. It was off the charts. They actually called the doctor down. And the doctor came and asked me what was going on. I said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't have blood pressure issues. Um, I'm under a lot of stress. I mean, my mother's dying, and I'm staying up at night. I'm not eating. I'm not hungry. I'm going on coffee right now. So maybe I'm just a little dehydrated." And they were worried. So about 10 minutes passed, and they're monitoring my vitals you know every 5 minutes, and within 10 minutes, everything's back to normal again. I felt fine. So I went back to my mom's room, and I waited for the sun to come up on Thursday morning, and I got up when after a couple hours and went down and got some more coffee, and my dad went down with me, um, and we went outside for a few minutes, and he was talking to me about when he met mom, and told me that he'd do it all over again, and that she was the love of his life, and uh, he was preparing, but he still wasn't accepting at that point, which can't blame him. I mean, you never give up. So we go back to the room, and throughout the week, um, I know my brother, my younger brother. I have two brothers. One is a baby brother. He's the one with Isaiah, the infant, as my brother, um, who's 3 years younger than me. And I have an older sister, a sister that's born after me, then my younger brother, then the baby. And everyone had come to visit. Um, there were nieces and nephews that came to visit. And I know my brother, my younger brother, had him, his wife, they had gone back. Everybody was, by Thursday, everybody had gone, had come and gone by then. And it was just my baby brother, his wife, and his young son, and my father. My baby brother's wife, uh, at that time, was a registered nurse. So, I mean, she was kind of filling us in with certain information that we weren't getting, you know, straight from the doctor or the nurse, but she was, she was going through the chart, and she was, looking through it and kind of giving us, the straight talk and just preparing us for things. And um, so by Thursday morning around 9:30, 10 o'clock, my father and I had come up from the cafeteria. And I remember that morning in particular, I remember my baby brother and his wife and the baby. Um, they had gone down, I think, for some breakfast. And during that time, um, I I was putting a compress on my mother's head, and I remember that one moment. For the first time I was there, I could actually feel this energy coming off of my mother, and it was it was shocking because I could actually feel. It felt like there was someone there, and I was really surprised by it. And the next thing I'm mind's eye in my mind's eye, I'm seeing my mother's face, and she's right in front of me. It's like a movie projector's up there in front of me, and I see her smile, and she says, "How you doing, Joey?" Called me Joey, and I'm kind of shocked by what I'm experiencing here, and so my mind's eye, I'm talking to her internally, and I said, I'm doing great, Mom. Now that I can sense that you're here, um, where have you been? I, in my mind's eye, I'm saying to her, I didn't sense any energy coming from you at all, and it didn't feel or seem like you were here. And she smiled at me and she said, I had places to go and people to see. Okay, wasn't expecting that. So then she says to me, and again, we're talking about in my mind's eye. I can see her, I can hear her, just as if somebody's standing in front of me. But this is like playing out on a movie screen. And she says, "I want to touch your face, Joey." Now, my mom was a touchy feely kind of person. Um, I mean, my mom loved people. I mean, nobody was a stranger. I know they say that about a lot of people, but that was my mom. I mean, my mom could talk to anybody about anything. And anytime she had pictures taken, it was not typically by herself. She usually was surrounded by kids. That was an amazing thing. And she loved being a grandmother and all that. But she was very touchy feely. She told people straight up how she felt about everything, and she wasn't afraid to tell people how much she loved them and how she cared for them, and she was a hugger. So I took her hand and I put it against my face, and I could just feel this warm energy. Very strange. It was different. I had never experienced anything like this. And so that passed, um and then she said to me, she said, "Joe, I want you to know that leukemia didn't get me. I just ran the wheels off the vehicle." And I don't talk like that. I don't. I mean, that's something my mother would say. And I was again. As this is going on, I'm kind of shocked. I'm not understanding what's going on here. Um, And I just I just remember thinking to myself, well, if there's something strange going on here, I'm going to take a shot at something here. I'm just going to ask a question. And so I said, well, mom, there's something, again, in my mind's eye, my mom is completely sedated. I mean, she's out completely. But in my mind's eye, I say to her, I said, so tell me, mom, I know something strange is going on here. Can you tell me what life has in store for me? Can you give me any hints, anything? And my mom just smiled and she said, I can't do that, Joe. You have to experience that journey, and I can't tell you. It's something you're going to have to go through. Okay, well, I tried. I gave it a shot. I figured, what the heck? Something strange is going on here. I'll try. So my mom says to me, she says, "Tell your father I wanna touch his face." But she says, I want to touch his face." So my dad was talking to one of the critical care nurses in the room, and I remember, um, as he's talking with her, I said, "Hey, Dad," I said, "it's gonna sound strange, but I said, Mom wants to touch your face." I said, "There's just some amazing energy coming from her right now, and you have to feel this." And so, the nurse went about doing her, whatever it was she was doing in the room, and my dad came over. Um, and once I said that to my dad, my mom said to me, she says, "Joey, you look tired. why don't you sit in the seat over there? Just relax a little bit." I thought she wanted me to go to sleep, so you know, I I sat over in the recliner, and my dad put my mom's hand against his face, and he said to me, he goes, "Wow." He goes, "Yeah, I can feel what you're talking about, Joe." I said, "Dad, that's something, isn't it?" He goes, "Oh yeah, it sure is." Because that's really, because I he couldn't, he was kind of shocked by it. And then, he said to the nurse, he goes, how long when somebody's taken off of their blood pressure medication, how long do they have? I mean, are we talking a couple days, a week? Um, a couple hours. He wasn't sure. He didn't know what this process, what kind of time frame we were looking at, that we were going to have mom. And so she said to him, she said to him, "Yeah, I've seen people go, you know, 3, 5 days, like, without their medication, without their blood pressure medication." And as I'm laying back in this recliner, um, my mom said, she again came up in front of me, "No, Joe, I don't have long." Oh, wow, okay, that's all right. And so I'm in the chair taking all this in, and I remember the nurse leaving, and as I'm laying in the hospital chair, I feel this warmth come up through my feet and just encompass my entire body. And I had never felt anything like that before. I've never, I've never, done any, I've never done heroin or morphine or anything like that. And, I guess that has this, almost like a numbing effect, but I wasn't numb, but this enveloped my whole body and I felt absolutely no pain at all. Nothing. I mean, I can't describe perfection, but that's what it was. It was the most perfect thing. We can't possibly feel that way here on Earth because there's too many variables. I mean, we have temperature, we have um, we have needs, we have wants, we have temperature fluctuations, we're hungry, we're tired, we have all these things that affect how we feel moment to moment. And I felt I felt like I didn't even need to breathe because I didn't feel like I needed anything. And here I am, you know, I'm going on very limited sleep. I hadn't really eaten anything to speak of since the Sunday night before. And here it is Thursday morning. I mean, I was hurting pretty good at that point. I mean, so I couldn't understand what was going on, but I wasn't going to fight it because it was perfect. I didn't want or need anything. Um and all of a sudden, my dad's still standing over by my mother and he said to me, he said, you know, he goes, all of a sudden I'm hungry. I think I'm gonna go down to the cafeteria and get something to eat. Okay. He said, I'll be right back, Joe. I go, Okay, Dad. That's good. I mean, because my dad really hadn't been eating, and I was starting to worry about him. So my dad left the room, and I'm laying back in this recliner. I'm facing my mother. I've got the monitors off to my right. I'm watching those like a hawk, just watching the blood pressure and the heart rate and all that good stuff. And my mom was fighting. I mean, heart rate's at 120, 130 up and down. The blood pressure wasn't good. And, that's one thing that I noticed that I did while I was there the whole time. I mean, I was just constantly watching the monitors. And I guess that's what most people do too in that situation. But I'm sitting there watching it. But um, then all of a sudden, I see my mother in front of me again. And she says, Joe, the toughest thing I have ever had to do was bury my granddaughter, was bury Steffi. And the next thing you know, my mom and my little niece, who was 7 years old when um, she died when she was seven in 1991. She was hit by a car. She did make it to a hospital, and God bless the veteran who resuscitated her on the road. She didn't die on the street. She made it to the hospital, but she had a brainstem injury and she didn't survive it. But she's standing there with my mother, and I remember she's standing next to my mother on my mother's left side. She's holding her hand, and she didn't say a word. I knew it was Steffi. I could see it clear as day. All she did was smile, and she waved to me. She waved to me with her left hand because she was holding my mother's hand with her right hand. My mom's left hand was holding Steffi's right hand, and and it was just kind of I'm in this place and I'm seeing my mother and I'm seeing my niece, and they're just standing there. Uh, And about that time, my sister in law came in and she's talking to my mother, and she's a nurse, and she's I'm looking over things and looking at the monitors and checking, I guess, the IV. And she said to my mom, she said, Peg, um, everybody's been here and you said your goodbyes. You don't have to hang on for us. You don't have to show us how strong you are. We know how strong you are. And I'm there in this state. I'm not hurting. I'm not feeling anything. I feel I feel amazing. And I'm just taking all this in, and she leaves. And then my brother comes in. And because I guess they were standing outside the ICU unit taking turns holding little Isaiah. So my baby brother came in, and as soon as he came in to the room, right away my mom said, "Tell your brother I want to touch his face." And my brother, I said, "Jamie, mom wants to touch your face, okay?" And then he looked at me with a strange look as he's walking past me. And when he did that, I felt this boom, boom inside me, this rushing, this woo inside me, like 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 arms and fists are going and pushing against my inside towards the outside. And it was a very strange feeling. It was like a roller coaster multiplied like by three or four, like three movements at once. And I'm my mother said it again, this time very sternly. She says, "Tell your brother I want to touch his face." I said, "Jamie," I said, "listen, mom wants to touch your face. Please do it, okay? Just do it for me, okay?" And then he walked over to her, and he remember him picked her arm up, and and I remember he did touch her face. But um at that point, he was saying something to her. I couldn't make it out, but I mean, uh there were a few moments later, and I know that Jamie didn't stay long. He left the room, and then my sister-in-law came back in. Um and at that point, I remember again, my sister-in-law came in and she said, again to my mom, "Peggy, I know this is hard for you, and you're fighting so hard for everybody, but just know that everybody has you told everybody while you were alive how much you loved them, and nobody's ever going to forget that. And um, you don't have to hang on for us because we know how hard this is for you." And at that point, I remember seeing in my mind's eye, um, my mom and Steffi standing there, and then they started to turn like they were going to walk away. And right at that moment, my my baby brother walks in with my little nephew Isaiah, and all of a sudden, I mean, my mom and Steffi are standing right there in front of me. I mean, they're just standing there. And as soon as as soon as my baby brother walked in with his son, my mom right away said, "I want to touch Isaiah's face." And so I said to my brother as he's walking past towards my mom, I said, um, "Jamie, mom wants to touch Isaiah's face." Well, as Jamie moved closer to my mom, Isaiah started to cry because, again, he's teething. And when he did that, it was the same thing as when my brother looked at me strangely. I felt it was like, again, the best way I can describe it was like fists inside my body are going like this, out and across and over from the inside out, pushing against me. And um, then my brother uh, handed the baby to my sister in law and tried to get close to my mom. And the same thing, he started crying and this vroom, vroom, just these this movement inside me is just, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Um, it didn't hurt, but it felt like pressure. It was the strangest thing. I obviously had never experienced anything like that before, and I haven't since. Um, and I remember my mom saying to me, take the baby. You take the baby." And I'm like, I said, "Jamie, give me the baby." I said, "I don't know what's going on right now, but man, this is killing me. Give me the baby. Let me hold the baby." And so um Jamie handed me the baby and everything settled down, and I'm in the state of perfection again. And I remember little Isaiah is like right here. He completely calmed down. All I could hear is like his breathing. He's not crying. He's not saying anything. He's just there. I'm holding him. And it was only a minute or so. And my mom, all of a sudden, her and Steffi, they're in front of me, and she says to me, "I want you to believe unconditionally there is a God and there is a heaven, and we go to a better place. Don't you ever doubt it, and don't you ever forget it. I want you to tell your father I did not want him to see me die. I want to be forever young in his eyes." And with that, Mom and Steffi turned and they started walking away from me. And I feel this pulling out of my body, exiting out my feet. And there's a window on the right side of the room. And as it pulled, I felt it pulling and I could feel it pulling and going to the right towards the window. And I said to my brother and my sister in law, I said, "Take Mom's hand. She's going now." And with that, I'm watching the heart rate monitor on the BP machine, the blood pressure, that whole monitor there. I'm watching the heart rate go from like 120 to 100 to 70 to 50, and it flatlined. She was gone. Um, and she was gone. And I, I just I just remember being, it was like, I know, um, I know people have had a near death experience kind of say that, how they felt on the other side, they didn't want to come back. Well, I was already here. And as soon as whatever that was no longer affecting me, I mean, I came crashing down. I mean, I felt, I mean, it was horrible. I mean, I just lost my mother. And on top of it, I'm back into reality on this earth or feeling the effects of no sleep, no food, nothing but coffee. and stress, and it just came down on me like a ton of bricks. Um, I mean, there are things that my years later, my brother Jamie, who was there with his little son, there are things that he said to me that I don't remember. What I remember is what I am telling you right now, what I'm saying right now. Uh, there were a couple of things that I don't remember. Um, and I'll touch on those right now. He told me, my brother told me that after it happened, um, I pulled him into the bathroom that was in my mom's room, and tears were just pouring down my face. And I grabbed him by the shirt and I pulled him up to me, and I said, "What the hell?" Well, I used saltier language in that. What the you fill in the blank just happened to me? What just happened? I don't remember that. Um, Now he also shared with me about 3 or 4 years later, because for a lot of years, what happened that day was very hard for me to process. Um, he told me that when I was talking to him, that I didn't sound like me. He said that I sounded like my mother, and I don't. Obviously, I'm hearing myself talk right now, and I hear how I sound when I talk. And while all this was going on, I didn't hear anything different when I was talking. The other thing that he told me is that when he walked over to her, when I said, "Mom wants to touch your face," he used to do this to my mom. My mom was 60 years old when she passed, and my mom was in a bodybuilder, and she wasn't as toned as she used to be when she was younger. And I guess he used to tease her. Um, and he would play with my mom's tricep, which was, as years went on, it got a little soft and um, a little flappy. And he did that in the hospital. And he said that I said to him, "Knock it off, Jamie. I don't like when you do that." I don't remember saying that at all. Another thing that um, that I'll share, after mom passed, um, you know, with within a few minutes of my mom flatlining, um, the nurses came into the room, and they checked on my mom, and they called the doctor in, and you know they 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 do what nurses and doctors do, and you know we we kissed mom goodbye, and then we had to go find my dad because he was down in the cafeteria still. So I remember we left the room, and then we headed down towards the cafeteria. And as we're walking down the hallway, I see these two priests, and they're walking towards me, and I'm still up over just what happened. And as these two priests are approaching me, I'm saying to them, and I'm baptized Catholic, and I say, fathers, I need to talk to you right now. The craziest, most amazing thing just happened. We lost our mother, and I need to talk to somebody now. And they just kept walking. They didn't even acknowledge me. And I mean, years later, and I mean, that bothered me a lot. I remember turning around and looking at them like, you're priests. I mean, when somebody calls out to you, I mean, you just walk past me. And I couldn't figure that out. That was, I don't know. But it bothered me a long time. And but again, when my brother, 4 or 5 years later, when we were talking about what happened that day, because we didn't talk about it much. I didn't. Um, that's when he told me, we didn't pass any priests in the hallway. I said, well, Jamie, I saw two priests when we were walking to go get dad. He goes, no, there were no priests. He goes, I heard you talking, but there was nobody there. So there, there's my point of view of what happened that day. Now, there's also things that my brother added to that a little bit later on. But, um, in private, uh, my my sister-in-law, you know, said to my brother, I'm a nurse, and I absolutely cannot explain what just happened in that room, and I'm never going to be able to. So she just left it at that. And she's a devout Catholic, and she just it pretty much blew her away because she's been a critical care nurse, and she's been around death a lot as a nurse, and she said that was the craziest wildest thing she's ever seen in her life up until that point. I don't know if anything's changed since then for her, but um, with that said, um, I know that later that day, uh, I went back to the Ronald McDonald House where, and they're fabulous. I mean, I'm going to give them props. They every chance I get, I donate to them because they put my mom and dad up the whole time she was going through her therapies, and that's a wonderful thing they do at the Ronald McDonald House. But I remember there were people that she knew that were getting treatment down there, um, and we told them what happened, and then one thing led to another, and I'm explaining to them what happened in in the room that day. And the strange thing was, I remember it was probably talking about two or three people down inside. It was one of the lounges, and by the time I ended up telling the story, by the end, there was probably 25 or 30 people that were standing in that room. I don't remember them being there until I had finished telling them what had happened. And over the past 20 years, I've probably told this story to 21, 22, maybe 23 people at the most. And I told it when I felt or got the impression to tell people. And I, I guess at that point, I felt it was the right time, and it's something maybe somebody needed to hear. So, um, this whole podcast was started because one of my colleagues, I felt the need to tell him the story because his mother had lost her father, and she has had a hard time coping with it, and it's been over 10 years. So I told him the story, and he's the one who said to me, and I respect his opinion a lot. Um, he said you should start a podcast and share your paranormal experiences with people. And you know, um, I respect his opinion a lot. That's why I've done this. And I'm also doing this because my mom was never good at keeping a good secret. And I think it's time for more people to hear the story. And maybe if it gives them a little bit different perspective on things, that's the true goal. Because I know the guy wants his flock back. I know that things are really, we're living in some interesting times. We're living in some very strange times. Um, and I'll be presenting more episodes, but I felt it was appropriate to lead off um, in memory of my mother, um, the incredible gift that she actually left for the world uh, on April 6th, 2000. And as I always like to say when I'm documenting a paranormal event, until next time, and there always seems to be a next time.